Paasnaweek is ongelukkig verby, maar ouer gewoonte is 'n tyd vir PRONTUIT. Goeienaand en welkom. Die oudste woonbuurt in Suid-Afrika, die Bo-Kaap, het onlangs die goeie nuus gekry dat hulle uiteindelik 'n stap nader aan 'n erfenisgebied is. Die Kaapse stadsraad het aangekondig dat die historiese woonbuurt as 'n erfenisbeskermingsone verklaar word. Dit na 'n stryd van etlike jare. Hoewel dit goeie nuus is, lê hef aan nog voor. Ons het 'n paar dae in die Bo-Kaap deurgebring om meer uit te vind oor die kleurryke woonbuurt en wat die toekoms inhou.
Ons ouma se huis was gewees hier in Langmarkstraat en ek kyk nou Langmarkstraat aan en ek dink terug aan die wonderlike tye hier in die Bo-Kaap in. Ek onthou die kombuis van my ouma, Mama Tima in Bo-Kaap in. Ek is nou 53 jaar oud, maar as ek terugdink, is ek nog altyd 'n kind van die Bo-Kaap.
Bo-Kaap tells the story of the city in all its contradictions and its violences and its beauty. And one can't really understand Cape Town without a reading of the Bo-Kaap as well. The Bo-Kaap is as old as the city. It was established since really a few years after Jan van Riebeeck arrived.
The Bo-Kaap was here, it was started as people needed housing. They were called heerhuisies that was built by Jan de Waal, who was a land developer at the time in the 1760s. He started developing these little heerhuisies for artisans, but of European descent, you know, and as business grew, as commerce grew, and as the demand for housing grew, they started moving out, and you had free blacks, and then later, formerly enslaved people moving into the space.
The community of Bo-Kaap and its slave society historically more generally in Cape Town was recognized as the most cosmopolitan in the world, not just in South Africa. So one could argue its significance in Cape Town. This was an artisanal community that to a large extent built the city, quite literally.
Bo-Kaap is 'n unieke gebied in terme van die geboue. Die combination van architecture, ek dink is enigins sy soort, dat daar nog so baie van dieselfde tipe geboue nog in een area is wat jy dit kan kry en dat dit nog gebruik word vir dieselfde doel as wat dit gebruik was oorspronklik as huise. Dan boonbehalwe dit natuurlik soos almal altyd van praat dat Bo-Kaap is die cradle of Islam as gevolg van die feit dat ons dit die oudste masjid, ons het een van die eerstes en die oudste begrafplaas, die Tanabaru.
Tell me about the burial ground.
So this is the Tanabaru burial ground, Tanabaru meaning new ground. It was a cemetery for Muslims, enslaved people. This is very significant. It's the oldest extant burial ground still in the city. But what makes this cemetery significant is not only its age or that it's still survived. It's that buried here you'll see around you these shrines, as the karamats as they're called in Islam, which are testaments to some of the early founders of Islam in the Cape who were not only brought Islam, learned the Quran by memory, taught Muslim children when the colonial government refused to establish schools for Muslims, but also they were anti-colonial activists and they recognized for the emancipatory politics they brought to slave society.
Tuan Guru was the man who arrived here as a political exile in 1780. He came here with a few other men. He came from a family of Qadis, which were religious leaders, and he was highly educated Islamically, and he was fearless, feared God, that was him. And he arrived here with other people, but they were sent here as political exiles because they fought against the Dutch on the colony in Tidori, the island that he came from. So when he arrived here, he spent a little bit of time on the mainland, and then he was sent off to Robben Island. When he came here, he did his homework very quickly. He realized that there was no religious freedom. He realized that people were praying secretly, and he also realized that there was no religious text available to all people. What he did that was so amazing, though, is that he wrote several copies of the Quran from memory at a time when there were not Qurans available freely. And there were very few mistakes. As far as I know, only 3 mistakes, the same 3 in all copies of the Quran. And he also wrote a book on Islamic law. Islamic jurisprudence, almost 630 pages to guide people. Should he die, there's some kind of a textbook for people to use. And these Qur'ans and this textbook was used for well onto 100 years within the community. So it was here on this property that Tuan Guru found that he could start a madrasa, which is an Islamic school. He could start prayers, but also constantly warned by the enslaved community that this was dangerous. These are the type of consequences that should you be found to be practicing your religion or preaching your religion. So he makes a plan to meet with the governor to ask for permission to continue praying. And of course he gets told flatly, no. Then upon not getting anywhere with the governor, he then gathers his congregation. Now, imagine a man comes along and he goes to the governor. This has never been seen here. You know, he's so bold, he's so courageous, and he's going to the governor. And this encourages people to come for prayer because they see his boldness. And so he gathers his growing now number of congregants and he marches through the streets of Bo-Kaap to a little quarry. And this quarry is where he held an open-air congregational prayer in defiance of the law. The Muslims, by the way, are not the first ones doing it. The Lutherans were doing it down in the city as well. The Dutch knew that if they had to arrest people or they had to beat anybody up at that prayer meeting, it would cause a huge kind of rebellion because not just the Muslim slaves were fed up with the situation here. And it wasn't just religion, it's how they were being treated. You know, by 1730, the number of enslaved people at the Cape were 2/3 the number of colonialists. Now that's very much an apartheid situation. You have a small group of people governing a large group of people. And the Dutch realized that one spark that could have been that prayer of defiance could have meant a huge rebellion here at the Cape.
The Bo-Kaap Museum was built in 1768. It's one of the oldest surviving buildings in its most original form. But before that, the Effendi family, the family of Mohammed Darwish Effendi, was removed from the house. They were removed in the late 70s for the house to be turned into a museum.
It's a horrible irony, isn't it?
Yeah. And then what happened was the house was then converted into what a stereotyped Cape Malay family was meant to look like, when in fact the actual family that was living in the house had just been removed.
For me, it's a combination of so many things. It's Tuan Guru and all these other teachers who arrived here. It's the educated people amongst the enslaved community who contributed. It's people who contributed to the rise of Afrikaans. The oldest Afrikaans text that's found to date is written in the Arabic script, and yet it was old Afrikaans, and it was used very, very commonly, especially by Imam Effendi, who came 100 years after Tuan Guru.
Die wyle Dr. Ahmad Davids, wat ook in Langmarksraad gewoon het, hy het 'n thesis gedoen, The Afrikaans of the Cape Muslims. In hierdie boek praat ons van die Arabiese Afrikaans, want dit word dikwels gesê dat Afrikaans behoort aan 'n sekere section van ons gemeenskap. Afrikaans behoort aan die Bo-Kaap, dit behoort aan die Kaapse Malays, dit behoort aan die Khoi mense, dit behoort aan die wit Afrikaner, dit behoort aan ons almal. Maar ons word baie verengels. So vandag staan ek hier en ek huil in my hart in, want ons Afrikaans soos ons oumas en oupas dit gebruik het, ons gebruik dit nie meer nie.